You already know what it is. We're doing some playoff predictions. In this video, it's going to be jam-packed because the playoffs are literally tomorrow. So I'm going to be talking about the Phoenix Suns Timberwolves series. I'm going to be talking about Lakers versus Nuggets, and I'm going to be talking about Magic versus Cavs. There will hopefully be another preview video on the actual day of those playoffs, just early in the morning. But other than that, we're just going to knock out as many of these as we can. Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference in how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. Also, real quick, I want to make a correction. In the last video, I said that Paul George was not an all-star this year. That was not true. It was one of two things happened. I could have looked it up, but either he didn't make it initially and then made it as a reserve, or he did make it initially and I took issue with that because I really didn't think he should have been an all-star. Well, one of those two things. Regardless though, yes, he was an all-star this previous year. My overarching point there about like they don't need his production as much, therefore they should have him focus his energy on Luka. I still believe that, but the actual point of not being an all-star, that's not true. But moving on, we're going to first talk about the headlining one, which I'm going with the Suns versus the Timberwolves. I debated to headline with the Lakers-Nuggets game because Lakers and clicks and all that, but honestly, let's be real, that series probably isn't going to be very long. We will talk about that a little bit later though, so I kind of just gave away what I thought, but like that was kind of inherently obvious. Rambling aside, Timberwolves versus Phoenix. This is an interesting matchup. The Timberwolves are a team that I believe to be a B-tier contender, while the Phoenix Suns are a team that I have been dogging on this entire season. To be fair, they did close out the season fairly strong. I was almost certain they were going to be a play-in team, and they managed to avoid that by capturing the 6th seed late. Bradley Beal started heating up as the year went along. I think their core of role players started to figure itself out more and more. The Royce O'Neal addition was nice. Yusuf Nurkic ended up being a better player than I anticipated, and unfortunately, because no one is happy to see it, but Grayson Allen turns out is a really solid NBA player. I believe he just got a big contract extension, but like one of the better three-point shooters in the entire league and a positive defender. So Phoenix is a little bit better, a little bit more beefier going into this postseason than I had originally anticipated. And while I've been a big Phoenix Suns hater, and I'm going to continue to be, I think they have a better shot in this series than, again, I would have guessed like a month ago. That said, I'm definitely leaning Minnesota, but let's go ahead and get into these matchups. So, first things first, I think that the Timberwolves have about as good of a Kevin Durant matchup as you can ask for. That is, of course, Jaden McDaniels, who is a 6'10", lengthy, very athletic, very strong defensive wing. He has the length to match Kevin Durant. He has the defensive instincts. And most importantly, something that I see cropping up a lot, I think I wrote this literally at some point for literally every series that I've done a preview of, he doesn't really have that many offensive responsibilities. So, you know, if he doesn't bring much to the offense because he's spending so much energy on defense, that doesn't really impact Minnesota all too much. Of course, you still want him to hit his open shots and things like that. But for the most part, hey, Jaden, you're going to play 40 minutes a game and you're going to spend almost all of your time exhaustingly defending Kevin Durant. But I think that is a strong enough matchup to actually genuinely bother Durant, not just, you know, contain him, but actually bother him. Because we've seen in the last couple of postseasons, Durant hasn't necessarily had the best time in the world. Last year, who was it that they lost to? They lost to Denver. Durant shot poorly in that series. He shot very poorly in the Boston Celtics series when he was on the Nets when they got swept. So there is a little bit of reason to believe that Kevin Durant might not just be electric in the playoffs, especially with such a great matchup on him. Whenever Jaden McDaniels, my friends call him J-Mac, and that's not his nickname. J-Mac is the nickname of their backup point guard, Jordan McLaughlin, but I say it all the time anyway, so apologies. But when Jaden McDaniels is not on Kevin Durant, probably going to go with Kyle Anderson in that matchup, probably just the only other really strong defender who has enough size to match Durant. It's definitely not nearly as good as McDaniels, but it's a better backup option than I think a lot of teams would have. So for the most part, I think they got the Kevin Durant matchup about as good of a position as you can, which is a good place to start with this series. Devin Booker is then the next guy up who you have to worry about, and that one's more interesting because do you go with Anthony Edwards in that matchup? Because realistically, Anthony Edwards is a very strong defender, but you really need his offense, and the Timberwolves in general are not a strong offensive team. They're not a bad one, but they're not really a good one either. Meanwhile, the Phoenix Suns are indeed a good one, so you're going to need the offensive contributions from Anthony Edwards. Is it going to be worthwhile to give him that defensive assignment, or do you want to go somewhere else? And unfortunately, if you do go somewhere else, it probably means a change to your starting lineup. In particular, Mike Conley is an interesting factor in here because, of course, the Phoenix Suns are a pretty decently sized team. Bradley Beal is a pretty big point guard. He's like 6'5", and he's strong. He's definitely bigger than Mike Conley. Devin Booker is next up as like the smallest player in that lineup, and whether it's Grayson Allen or Royce O'Neal starting, I think it'll be Grayson, another 6'5" guy at the absolute minimum. So I do wonder if perhaps Mike Conley might just be a little bit too small, and because you need that Anthony Edwards matchup on Devin Booker, or because you don't want to do that too much, maybe you go to it late, but you don't go to it throughout the entire game, you might want to get some more Nickeil Alexander-Walker minutes because he's borderline all defense this year off of the bench for them, one of the better point of attack defenders in the entire NBA. So I feel like maybe not all the time, but for a large stretch of this series, we might see Nickeil Alexander-Walker in at the guard spot, you know, whether it's point or shooting. It's really arbitrary because I think Anthony Edwards would just be the main on-ball creator at that point. You know, Mike Conley's three-point shooting, his consistency, the always making the right play, and being a decent defender for his size, all of that adds up well to him being a positive player, and I'm not trying to knock Mike Conley. I'm purely just saying from a matchup perspective, I don't know if I want Ant spending all of his time on Devin Booker, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a great solution to come in and do that. Not as good of an offensive player, so you're taking a hit to your offense that otherwise is already doing that, but you are having a very strong matchup on Phoenix's primary offensive creators. I would probably go with Ant on Beal at that point from there because Beal realistically is very clearly third in the pecking order with this team, even if he did close the season fairly strong. So yeah, that's what I would probably do. I don't know if I'm outright changing that starting lineup, but I would not be surprised if you saw some version of the Timberwolves starters, except Mike Conley, subbed out for Nickeil Alexander-Walker. As for how the Timberwolves are defended by the Suns, my first thing that I wrote here in my notes is like, okay, who's defending Cat? Are you going with Kevin Durant in that matchup? Because, of course, while I said the Suns are not small, they're also not the biggest team in the world. They have Kevin Durant playing the 4, and against Karl-Anthony Towns, he's got quite a weight difference there. I think they're basically the same height, but weight-wise, Cat definitely can put some strength into Kevin Durant. Now, how much is he actually going to post up? I don't know. Cat is also weirdly kind of not that great at posting up. He's had times of being great, but it's just not the most viable play. And like realistically, even if you're like trying to target that mismatch, might be better for the defense that you're trying to do a Cat post up than actually running action. I remember a long time ago, I think it was 2017, the Wizards versus the Celtics. I guess it's not that long ago, but, you know, 7 years ago. Feels long if you're 24. They had Otto Porter Jr. He was defended by Isaiah Thomas. Otto Porter Jr. is 6'8". Isaiah Thomas is 5'8". So huge height discrepancy there, but of course they didn't want Isaiah on John Wall or Bradley Beal, and you had to have him on the floor for his offense, so they put him on Otto Porter. So the Wizards ended up trying to post Otto up on Isaiah a couple of times, but Otto Porter's not a very strong post player, and the Celtics were capable of bringing decent enough help that he wasn't just getting easy looks over him. And it ended up just interrupting the flow of Washington's offense. So they just stopped doing it because it was like, well, an Otto Porter post-up isn't a good play even if he's got a foot height advantage on the guy. So I could see something similar there with Cat just being like, yeah, we're not going to post him up on Durant. He's stronger, but, you know, is that really resulting in the best possession? Realistically, though, another note, as I mentioned, do you want to have Durant spending all that energy on defense? I don't know about that. Do you go with a smaller wing like Royce O'Neal and just hope again that the post-up thing doesn't happen too much? Royce is considerably smaller than Kevin Durant, so at that point maybe the posting up thing is worth trying. I don't know, that's a weird one. I really cannot find a specific solution to that. I think Grayson Allen defending Anthony Edwards is a fine matchup. It's not the best in the world, but Grayson is a positive defender. I'm actually interested in their approach to defending Ant. Do they go with what the Denver Nuggets did last year, which is they just kind of let him cook one-on-one? They didn't really bring too much help defense on him because ultimately the rest of the team wasn't really scoring all that well, and they were more than capable of locking down basically everybody else. So Ant was scoring 31 points per game, but the Timberwolves in general were scoring 105, and the Nuggets were outscoring them by 9 points per game. So I think I would probably take that approach of just like, look, give him the Grayson Allen matchup. Grayson can do his best. Otherwise, I'm not really bringing two to the ball too much. Although, to be fair, Ant is less good at making that read than other like top-tier players in the NBA, so that could potentially throw him off. But one way or the other, I'm probably just going to let Ant cook and then just try to lock down everybody else. I am really concerned about that Cat matchup, though. As for the X factors, for the Timberwolves, I have to go with Cat, not only because of his potential to burn people on the switch, but also, can he score more consistently? Can he space the floor? He averaged about 18 in that Nuggets series last year, which is cool, but his efficiency was He's also just coming back from injury, and that could potentially hobble him. Also, while he can burn people on switches, he can get burned on switches himself. So is he going to do that? How is he going to hold up defensively? That's kind of the thing you ask about Cat in any given context, but what do you know? Here we are again. For the Phoenix Suns thing, I actually put Kevin Durant's defense as the X factor. I'm not concerned about his offense, even though I do think the Timberwolves have a good matchup against him. But, like, is he going to be able to put enough energy on the defensive end? Because he's more or less their best defender, at least in terms of, like, impact, just because he's big, because he's long, he knows how to be in the right place at the right time. He's a pretty good rim protector, all things considered. That definitely does make him one of their more impactful defenders, and him being able to free roam, especially whenever the matchup is right, especially if he was like matched up against Shaden McDaniels, for example, that could be a way to interrupt an otherwise mediocre defense or offense from the Timberwolves. So I don't know, can he have a real impact on the defensive end? That could make a real difference. As for some other notes, the Suns, this is something that's been talked about plenty going into the series. They take a lot of mid-range shots, and the Timberwolves give up the most mid-range shots in the entire league, which can I just say about that defensive strategy? I feel like every year there's a new team where it's like, they protect the paint and they defend the three-point line. They only allow mid-range shots. They allow the most mid-range shots in the league. And it's like, bro, who cares? That's obvious. Like, that's not a revolutionary concept, and I feel like it regularly gets brought up like it's some genius thing. Yeah, that's just how you play defense in 2024. Mid-range shots the least efficient. You have to give up something the way that offense works now. Give them the least efficient shot every time. But of course, Phoenix is the best mid-range shooting team in the entire league. Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are some of the best mid-range shooters in the entire league. They have increased their three-point volume as the season has gone along, but nonetheless, you can't knock the tendencies out. These guys love their mid-range jumpers. So they have to be scorching from mid-range in order to win the math game here. The thing is, they have the personnel to potentially be scorching from mid-range. I remember last year, Devin Booker could not fucking miss from mid-range. And at that point, if you're shooting 70% on mid-range jumpers, then it is indeed a good shot. So yeah, that's something to watch for sure. I do think they could have a game or two. It's about whether or not they can actually sustain that kind of efficiency throughout a series. And that's ultimately where my prediction is going to come down to. Wolves in 6, because I think the Suns will realistically have 2 games where Durant and Booker, or depending on the degree of it, are just dominant from mid-range, and they just can't miss. And those games, at least one of those games is going to happen, potentially 2. As I like to do with these predictions, I'm going to say it's closer to 5 games than it is to 7, because I think Minnesota is just a well-rounded team. They're a better team overall, but in many different metrics, basically everything except for isolation scoring, the Timberwolves are a better team. Playmaking, defense, rebounding, scoring in a system, running any kind of actual system, off-ball movement, three-point shooting, finishing in the paint, post-scoring, like everything I'm given to the Timberwolves besides for literally just scoring one-on-one and like mid-range shooting. And those things are nice, but they're not foundational to success at the level that the other things that the Timberwolves are good at. So I'm going with Wolves in 6. Moving on to Lakers versus Nuggets. Most important thing from the matchups, and I'll admit that I am borrowing this point from JJ Redick, but then again, this is something that we saw from them last year in this matchup in the Western Conference Finals. You need to keep Anthony Davis in the paint, even if that means giving a less ideal one-on-one matchup to Nikola Jokic. At the end of the day, there's really fucking nobody that can stop Nikola Jokic, so you kind of just have to concede that. You have to concede, like, yeah, he's going to hit 8 to 10 floater range, hook range shots in this game, regardless of who is defending him, whether it's Anthony Davis or it's Austin Reeves. So for that reason, you got to go with the Rui or LeBron, or like worst case, like Taurean Prince, maybe a little bit of Jared Vanderbilt, although he seems to be more or less cut from their playoff rotation. But one of those guys, just a big physical guy who's not too easy to move. Put that guy on Jokic, and then you put Anthony Davis. His matchup is essentially Aaron Gordon, but really he's just playing that free safety, free roaming defensive role. And of course, the Denver Nuggets are a high-volume paint team. They're probably the most paint-scoring team in the entire league. You have one of the best rim protectors in all of basketball. I think you just keep that guy camped out right next to the rim as much as is conceivably possible. Obviously, with that Aaron Gordon matchup, you have to be mindful of the backdoor cuts, not allowing that to happen. But anytime he's like just standing in the corner, you know, shoot that shit if you want, dog. You shot 29% from 3 in the regular season. I don't fucking care. You don't want to get burned on a backdoor alley-oop. AD also has to be careful about bringing that help defense on Jokic, as you always have to do. You can't inconspicuously bring help defense on Jokic. You need to know that someone's going to help you on the back line. Speaking of, when that happens, whether it's LeBron or who else, someone needs to be able to be ready to rotate on that Aaron Gordon back cut, because Lord knows he's going to make it. Anytime AD gives him a lane available, he's going to make it, so someone else has to cut that off. Ideally, a more physical defender who would handle a switch really well. Like if it's Austin Reeves, they'll just throw that to Aaron Gordon anyways, because Austin can't get to the ball. And even if he comes down with it, he's going to score on him in the post. So I would say LeBron, ideally. Unfortunately, the factor that comes with that is that, like, you're also going to be leaving a talented three-point shooter open more likely than not, unless they got some bench guys in. When they do have bench guys in, you should feel super comfortable doing it, but otherwise you're going to leave either Michael Porter Jr., KCP, or Jamal Murray wide open. That's kind of the real bitch of defending the Nuggets, is it's like there's going to be a good shot available almost any time. Even if that Aaron Gordon back cut gets cut off, well then, even if it's a fucking cross-court pass, Nikola Jokic is going to make it. So, I don't know, you kind of got to pick your poison. That's the way you play with Denver. You got to try not to let them dominate the paint too much, because that's what they want to do. Let them burn you from outside. Obviously, they can still do that, but it's not their ideal primary source of offense. And honestly, as long as you're making them play to your will, literally in any capacity whatsoever, you're doing something right. And that's the one thing that they had displayed in the past in this Western Conference Finals, is they could make Denver play to their will for a couple of minutes. And in those minutes, it would be like the only time where it looked like LA had any fucking chance at all. Hopefully you can get that to last just a little bit longer than a couple of minutes. Oh, also, I wanted to mention, when they go to Aaron Gordon as the center, when Jokic is sitting, obviously this is a brief amount of time in the game, but every minute counts in the playoffs. I would go with LeBron on that matchup. I would actually run LeBron at center next to Aaron Gordon. I don't really feel like they have a better center option. I'd rather have the versatility, and it's not like they're going to burn you with their size. So yeah, I would do that. They don't really have a great matchup one-on-one versus Jamal Murray. Like Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell are fine. It's not the worst matchup, though, and I think you can mostly get away with defending that straight up. You don't want to switch too much on the Jokic-Jamal two-man game. That's what they're going to default to when things start getting tougher. Obviously, it's easier said than done not to switch, but when you allow those switches to happen, either you're getting someone stuck on the perimeter who's not adept for it, or you're getting a little guy on Jokic, at which point you're going to have to rotate, you're going to be scrambling, they're going to find somebody open. So literally you got to fight through that screen as much as you conceivably can. And as for how the Nuggets defend the Lakers, honestly, I feel like it's pretty straight up. Like most of the default matchups make the most sense. I think Aaron Gordon on LeBron is even the default matchup, but if it's not, I would definitely put AG on LeBron. That's basically the only thing that I would add. Otherwise, like, just defend them straight up. They don't have a lot of action that's complicated. They don't have a lot of things that you have to concede. You know, you can kind of stop the Lakers from getting a good shot fairly often. Same can't really be said for the Denver Nuggets. Moving on to the X Factors, D'Angelo Russell for the Lakers. He was really good in this play-in game, which gives me hope. He played with a lot of confidence that suggests that he can carry over this play into the postseason. Of course, he's had a history of being a playoff dropper, basically a complete non-factor in the Denver series last year. So whether or not that production translates into this series, that will make a world of difference. Honestly, I think if his production from last season translated into this series in the Western Conference Finals, it might have been the difference in whether or not they win or lose. Not the series, but like literally a game. Like literally a single game if D'Angelo Russell played well, might have actually got one. On the Nuggets, I said Aaron Gordon, just simply because, as I mentioned, with how the Lakers are going to scheme against him defensively, he's going to get a lot of open three-pointers. So, you know, is he going to hit those? Honorable mention, just for another X factor, Peyton Watson. As I've said pretty much throughout this entire year for Denver, I think he can be, you know, ostensibly their Bruce Brown, you know, their first guy off of the bench. Obviously, I don't expect him to be, you know, as good as Bruce Brown, but he can be the guy who reliably plays 25+ minutes a game off of their bench. You know, if he's hitting his three-pointers, if he's playing really good defense. I'm not all that lacking in confidence in his defense, but the three ball could be different. Otherwise, yeah, Aaron Gordon, hit those threes. Other notes, LeBron's healthy this time. He was not in the Western Conference Finals. I remember he had like a something 25 or whatever point half in the fourth game. That still wasn't enough to win, but otherwise he was kind of hobbled throughout that series. And also, Anthony Davis is better than he was last year, less injury prone than he was last year. So I think there's a decent chance that they can actually get a couple of games here. I actually feel like the Lakers are kind of the Heat of the West at this point, where it's like literally this year and last year, they weren't one of the lower seeds in the conference. They ended up being a pretty damn good playoff team. Unfortunately, this time around, they are facing the defending champions and the team that I anticipate making the finals out of the Western Conference. Pretty much everybody does. So, unfortunately, my prediction is going to be Nuggets in 5, and I'm going to say closer to 4 than 6. But I also feel like the Lakers are more equipped for this matchup this year than they were last year. So, that's why I did give them a game versus last year where they got swept. Also, for what it's worth, all of those games were close. Like, just because it's a sweep doesn't necessarily mean that it's like a washed series. Like, the Lakers had a decent chance in winning at least 3 out of 4 of those games. So yeah, I'm going to go with a gentleman sweep here, but that's just more because the Lakers are just not the Nuggets, and it's not a knock on the Lakers. You just ain't the Nuggets, man. All right, last and honestly kind of least, because these are two of the less interesting teams in the entire league to me. No offense to fans of either of these teams, but the Cavs versus the Orlando Magic. Now, first thing on the matchup front, immediately I realized, holy shit, the Magic match up super well against the Cavs. So first of all, Jalen Suggs, potentially all defense this year, one of the best defensive guards in the entire league. Perfect matchup for Donovan Mitchell. Like, really, really, really perfect. Don't know if you can get much better than that. Gary Harris has been their starter as of late, which is interesting. They have the bona fide, like, Suggs, Paulo, Wendell, and Franz. And then after that, the fifth guy, kind of a question mark. I feel like I would play Jonathan Isaac in that fifth spot, but he's only gotten like 18 minutes a game this year. Actually, his last like 30 games or so, he's shooting like 47% from 3. So obviously the 3-point shooting is something you're concerned about with him normally, but he's been hitting them. So low volume, 2 a game, but 2 attempts a game. But that percentage, I don't know. I feel like I'd play John Isaac more. Maybe there's something about him that I am not missing, that I am missing. I will admit I've probably watched of all of the playoff teams in the East, the Orlando Magic the least. But John Isaac is a very positive defender. He's really big, and if you just want to really commit to the defense thing as the Magic have done, I feel like I'd go that direction. Gary Harris is a solid defender, all things considered. I would probably put him on Darius Garland. Really the only matchup that makes any kind of sense. Darius wasn't very good last year for the Knicks for the Cavs in the Knicks series. So that is something to keep an eye on. How will he translate to the postseason yet again? Don't get me wrong, I don't love the Gary Harris on Garland matchup. It's probably the worst thing they have going for them, but it does mean that you get to put Jalen Suggs on Donovan Mitchell, and you just have to do that. But yeah, I think Jonathan Isaac should probably play more. That's what I would go with. There's a chance that the reason he's been playing less is because he's injury prone, so they just want to have him ready to go for the postseason. So I could see that being the case. As for how they defend the Cavs in general after that, I think obviously you're going to sag off of Evan Mobley. Mobley low-key started taking some threes when he returned from injury, but like that's still not something a defense is even a little bit concerned about. Obviously you're going to load up in the paint as you do with double bigs, and I think you just do that and then trust your point of attack guys to handle their guards. And I think that this is going to be a difficult scoring series for the Cavs, no doubt. As for how they defend the Magic, who defends Paolo is an interesting question, because Evan Mobley, I don't know if he's necessarily quite quick enough to defend Paolo. Mobley moves well on his feet, but I don't know if he moves as well as Paolo does. And I also feel like Isaac Okoro probably slightly too small. I mean, it's probably fine. He can probably handle it. And I think my guess would be that's the initial matchup. Then again, you know, you have to have Franz on Mobley defending Franz at that point. And maybe you put him on Gary Harris, but Gary Harris is a strong three-point shooter. So I don't know if there's a really great solution there. But I'd probably go with Isaac Okoro just because he'd have the foot speed, and he's pretty strong. He can handle Paolo's physicality. You got to sag off of Franz. Franz shot below 30% from three this year, so there's going to be a lot of guys just getting wide open three-pointers in this series because neither defense has any belief in them and their ability to make it. And that ultimately makes the X factors Franz and or Evan Mobley. You know, Franz, he needs to hit his threes. He's been a good three-point shooter at times, so I have more hope for him to do that than Evan Mobley. But yeah, hit your fucking threes, Franz. I also put Darius Garland as another potential X factor for the Cavs just because he missed a lot of games. Both of them missed a lot of games. They were better lately, but, you know, how is it going to translate to the playoffs? Who knows? Last, getting into the notes, do we see the Cavs abandon the double bigs in this series? As I mentioned, this is already a tough defensive matchup for the Magic, or for the Cavs against the Magic, rather. So that means that the spacing, that factor, it's already gonna be rough. The fact that Evan Mobley and Jared Allen are playing together, you might just have to go with Dean Wade as like a small ball four and then get Mobley either at center or Allen, whoever you prefer. Probably Allen right now, definitely Allen right now. I don't know, Mobley might get played out of this series at least to some degree. Because Mobley and Allen was a negative factor in that Knicks series. It was something that was exploited quite often, just having two guys in the starting lineup who cannot shoot whatsoever. That's just inherently going to get used against you. The way that they could swing that is that rebounding-wise, I feel like they would have a little bit of an advantage just because, again, double bigs. Apollo is a decent rebounder for his size, but he is ultimately not like a traditional four. Not really anyways. He's at 7 rebounds a game. Wendell, also not a crazy strong rebounder, not a bad one, but not a great one. I don't think it's enough to swing the series, but it's probably something to watch out for, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Cavs got a game just because of the rebounding differential. In terms of their regular season average, literally it's a difference of 1 rebound, but Evan Mobley missed a ton of stuff. And again, that's not necessarily indicative of what their matchup looks like. But with that said, bold prediction here potentially, because I think most people are going with the Cavs. I'm going with Magic in 7. Although I do feel like it can go either way. Pretty much anytime I'm picking a team to win in 7, it means that I feel that way. The Cavs have the best player in this series, but I feel like they're the more inconsistent team. Last year versus the Knicks, they didn't give me any reason to believe they would be a strong postseason presence, and I don't know that much has changed this year. The fact that Isaac Okoro is a much stronger three-point shooter helps, but either way, I just feel like the Mobley-Allen thing just is going to hinder them against Orlando's already strong defense. So I am going to go with Magic in 7. But yeah, that was it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video. Let me know what you think of these series, what your predictions are. But that is it. Goodbye.